Angiosperms, or flowering plants, first appeared about 135 million years ago during the Cretaceous period. They're the most recent of all the plant phyla, originating only on land, and they have very quickly dominated the Earth's landscapes. The vast majority of living species of all plants reproduce using flowers and fruits. This includes not only flowers like the one pictured in this slide, but it includes trees, shrubs, grasses, and many more plants than you probably realize. So let's take a look at amazing angiosperms. Get your paper ready, wide right, skinny left. See you on the next slide. The word angiosperm comes from two Greek words, angion meaning vessel and sperma meaning seed. So angiosperms are plants with their seeds in a vessel or a container. So let's see how this is different than the naked seed plants, those gymnosperms. Angiosperms have developed a unique reproductive organ known as a flower. Bet you didn't know that one. Flowers are an evolutionary advantage because they attract insects and animals, which then transport pollen from plant to plant. This is much more efficient than wind pollination, used by gymnosperms and ferns, and water pollination used by bryophytes. It's often beneficial to the insects as well. A symbiotic relationship. Do you recognize this fruit? In the drawing to the left, probably not. In the drawing on the right, maybe. It's an apple. The drawing on the left is what an apple looks like before it is an apple. It's an apple flower. The flower contains ovaries, which contain ovules. The ovary surrounds and protects the ovules, and when it's pollinated, the seeds. Remember the three main parts of the seed? Embryo, stored food, and seed coat? More on that later. In this diagram, you can see the stamen, which contain the pollen. Remember, that's the male gametophyte, and it's up there in the red circle. The ovules are located inside the ovary. They're in the next circle. And in this case, the ovary is located below the flower. There are a lot of different arrangements of flower parts. Sometimes the ovary is in the flower. Sometimes it's halfway there. Right now we're going to stick with the simple one, and the apple flower is about the simplest. Now, when the ovule is fertilized by a pollen grain, a seed or seeds develop. Angiosperms are unique, however, because when a seed begins to grow, the plant also begins to store additional food in the ovary around the seed, causing the ovary to swell many times its original size, producing something that's familiar to all of us, a fruit. And you see that here in the picture. The petals aren't needed any longer and they fall off. However, the sepals and sometimes the remains of the stamen can be found on the bottom of the apple. And if you cut the apple across its equator, you can see the arrangement of ovules within the ovary. You can also tell if the plant is a monocot or a dicot too. What do you think in this one? I see 5 ovules, so it must be a dicot. Remember, multiples of 4 or 5 are dicots. So, to recap things here, angiosperms are vessel seeds, or seeds in vessels. The flower is the reproductive organ containing ovaries that surround and protect the developing seeds, and male reproductive parts including the stamen and the pollen grain. The fruit is a wall of tissue surrounding the seed or seeds. The fruit is unique to angiosperms and it helps in the dispersal of seeds, attracting animals who eat the fruit, and then they might poop the seed out many kilometers away where the seed can sprout and grow in a new place. Pretty amazing those angiosperms are, don't you think? As we said on the last slide, there are so many different arrangements of male and female flower parts that you could be here all day looking at all those different pictures. We don't need to get into those specifics, but what I do want you to know that there are different arrangements of the flower parts that result in different looking seeds and fruits. Simple fruits, like the one on the far left, result from one flower and one ovary producing multiple seeds, as you see here in the pea plant. An apple would fall into this category as well. In the middle picture you see an aggregate fruit. A raspberry is an example of that. One flower has multiple ovaries, resulting in a fruit that looks like a collection of little fruits. And it is in a way. A strawberry is another example of an aggregate fruit. On the far right, we have a multiple fruit. A pineapple is an example of this. Many flowers, many ovaries, many seeds. Mulberries, figs, sunflowers, all of those are examples of multiple fruit. So, as many different kinds of flowers as there are also many different kinds of seeds. Think of all the seeds you know of. Corn, beans, grass, cherries, peas, wheat, acorns, oranges, lemons, limes. Each different type of fruit is an adaptation to a unique situation, and it helps that plant succeed in its environment. Here are just a few to consider. Now, next time you're at the grocery store, look around, or the hardware store, look around at the seed display and look at all the different kinds of seeds there are. Nature is really amazing. So we talked about monocots and dicots in our first set of notes. Let's talk about them again real briefly and kind of review, because monocots and dicots are one way that we group angiosperms. Remember, the term monocot and dicot means it has a single seed leaf or two seed leaves, or cotyledon. The seed leaf is what provides the embryo plant with its food. And when you look at the picture here, the bean seed on the left, you can see the plumules, or the baby leaves, and what will be the stem. And in the corn seed, it's a little bit harder to see in the monocots, but all the same structures are still there. They just only have one seed leaf. Another way to tell monocots from dicots is to look at the vein pattern on the leaves. Monocots have parallel veins like we see here on the left, and dicots have a branching pattern on the leaves like we see here on the right. So grass plants are all monocots because they have parallel vein patterns. A third way to tell monocots from dicots is to look at the petals on the flower. Monocots have petals in multiples of 3, dicots in multiples of 4 or 5. So as we said before, what if I have a flower that has, say, 12 petals? Well, 12 is a multiple of 3 and 12 is a multiple of 4. I would look at the leaves, or I would look at the roots, or another part to determine it. I can also look at the stem, and I can look at the cross-section, or a cross-section of the stem, and look at the vascular bundles. Remember, vascular bundles are xylem and phloem. In a dicot on the left, the vascular bundles are arranged in a ring all around close to the edge of the stem. In a monocot, like I see on the right, the vascular bundles are scattered all through the stem. An example of a monocot would be asparagus. An example of a dicot would be celery. Lastly, we can look at the roots. Fibrous roots in a monocot, like I see on the left, an onion is a monocot. Taproots are found in dicots. A carrot and a beet are good examples of a dicot. So I can look at any one of those 5 characteristics to determine if something is a monocot and a dicot. And remember, those traits just help them survive in that environment. There are a few other ways that we classify angiosperms as well, as we are working our way around the classification ladder. One way we classify them is by the type of stem. Okay, we look at the characteristics of the stem. Here are 2 examples. This is really tough, so look closely. Which one is woody and which one is herbaceous? Okay, this is one way we do classify plants. A herbaceous stem can photosynthesize, but it doesn't support a whole lot of weight, so herbaceous plants do not tend to be extremely tall. A woody stem is just the opposite. It doesn't photosynthesize, but it can support a tremendous amount of weight. And both of these types of stems are adapted for specific environments, and it helps those plants be successful. Woody plants tend to be trees, shrubs, vines. Herbaceous plants tend to be the ones that we cut and put in vases on our dining room table. Another way we classify plants is by how long it takes them to complete its life cycle. And there are three types: annuals, biennials, and perennials. So we look at their lifespan. In this picture, we see some annuals. They come back every year. Okay, it takes 1 year to complete its life cycle. It flowers, it produces seed, and it drops its seed all in one life cycle. Bluebonnets, dandelions, and sunflowers. Great examples of that. These are biennials. They take 2 years to complete one life cycle. Queen Anne's lace is one on the right-hand side. Foxglove is another on the left-hand side. So they take 2 years to flower and produce seed and then start producing more plants. The last one are perennials. Perennials don't die off. They come back every year. And grass is a perennial, roses are a perennial. The annuals die off every year. If the conditions are right, the seeds will grow, like we have the wildflowers around here. But oftentimes perennials just need to be replanted year after year. Perennials don't need to be replanted. And perennials live for more than 2 years. So those are two more ways that we characterize angiosperms: by looking at their stems or by looking at their lifespan. So, some things to think about here. What reproductive structures are unique to angiosperms? And what's the function of each? In other words, what does it do? What do the ovaries do? What do the pollen grains do? What does the flower do? What does the fruit do? How does fruit help a plant in seed dispersal? Why is that advantageous? Can you give me an example of a woody plant and give me an example of a herbaceous plant? What's the difference between them? And how about monocots and dicots? Can you give me some examples of monocots and dicots and tell me about their leaves or their flowers or their roots? Think about those things. Take a look at the next slide. A little more to think about over there. So that's it for the angiosperms. Next time you're at the grocery store or the farmer's market, amaze and astound your family and friends with your newfound knowledge of plants, plant parts, and plant classification. It's really pretty amazing, the diversity in plants, I think. So while you're pondering this little cartoon over here and Eddie and his new job and his huge celery, here's a few more questions to think about. Be careful though. These might pop up on a test. What do chickens grow on? Why did the grapes stop in the middle of the road? Why shouldn't you tell secrets in a cornfield? What did one snowman say to the other snowman? What is small red N whispers? And don't forget, draw a line across the bottom, write a summary for your gymnosperms, your angiosperms, and write your questions and bring your notes to class. See you guys in class. Bye.